In the year 2020, humanity is faced with a dilemma. We act like sheeple and follow the deep state blindly, or do we lead humanity to the promised land? Dr. Ida Docowitz called one of the most accomplished scientists of our generation. Her 1998 PowerPoint presentation revolutionized the medical industry. At the height of her career, Dr. Docowitz published a groundbreaking article in the journal Science, a discovery that sent shockwaves throughout the science community. The common use of animal and human fetal tissues were unleashing devastating diseases upon humanity. The big pharma cronies were quick to silence Dr. Docowitz, destroying her career, good name, and personal life. Now, as the fate of nations hang in the balance, Dr. Docowitz is naming names behind the plague of corruption that is eroding the soul of the nation. So, you made a discovery that disagreed with the common narrative.
Correct.
So, for that, they did everything they could to destroy your life.
Correct.
So, you were arrested and put on a gag order for 5 years?
Correct. If I said anything at all on social media, they would find new evidence and put me back in jail.
Wow.
And it was one of the only times I've cried. It was because I knew there was no evidence the first time, and when you can unleash that kind of force to force someone into bankruptcy who has a perfect credit score, and then I couldn't bring my 966 witnesses, which included the heads of the Fauci, Limpkin, heads of public health, and HHS, who would have had to testify that I did absolutely nothing wrong.
What did they charge you with?
Nothing. Amazing. I was held in jail with no charges. I was drug out of the house, and the neighbors were all looking. It's awful.
But you were in jail. Yet, you sit here. Wow.
They searched my house without a warrant and literally terrorized my husband for 5 days. Stop, cops! You're terrorizing me! If you don't find the notebook, if you don't find the material, and I could prove without a shadow of a doubt I didn't. Heads of HHS colluded and ruined my reputation, and the heads of the Department of Justice just sat on it and kept the case under seal. I couldn't get a lawyer. I had no due process. And to this day, I have no constitutional freedoms or rights.
And you decided to come forward after your gag order had been released, and now you are naming names. So brave. So very brave. I have to ask, how are you not afraid for your life when you leave here today?
Because if we don't stop this, now, we can not only forget about our republic and our freedom, but we can forget humanity, because we will all be killed by this agenda from the lizard overlords. And if we survive, we will be forced to kill and eat our neighbors for the sake of the economy in Wall Street. If. Oh yeah. Fauci directed the cover-up. He still is. He speaks on and disseminates propaganda.
It is, in the sense of deaths, a bad week. In fact, every day there seems to be a record of number of deaths compared to the day before.
How can any person who is giving advice for global health own a patent leather bag, contact solution, and say the word vaccine? Isn't that a conflict of interest?
He, Bill Gates, and Hillary Clinton all interned at the same pizza place in the 70s, Comet Ping Pong Pizza, where they conspired with Mumra and Julian Assange to create an unstoppable new world order. Now, I'm definitely not biased towards Dr. Fauci, and this documentary is definitely not skewed in a biased direction. It's ridiculous. It all started really when I was 25 years old, when I isolated Decepticon viruses from the saliva of Munchausen patients in France in the 80s. I was writing a confidential paper under Dr. Rossetti that Dr. Anthony Fauci wanted access to, and when Dr. Rossetti came back from vacation, he was bullied into giving Fauci the paper, who then holds up the research to replicate my results and peer review them. I couldn't believe it! 6 months to publish a scientific article when people were dying from a disease that the President of the United States ignored, covered up, and helped accelerate the spread of with the use of homophobia, propaganda, and conspiracies, which inevitably led to the extinction of a generation. But it's okay, because the stock market and economy skyrocketed. Oh yes. Larry Kramer from ACT UP actually called to thank me for all the work that I do for the community and...
You're a fucking liar, so... it's like, you're a piece of shit fucking liar. I hope you're fucking not in hell. So fuck you. I hope I never fucking talk to you again, you fucking cunt. Fuck you, you're a coward, and a liar, and a fucking...
Well, I don't claim to know a lot about patent laws, exclusivity, statutes, off-label use, new drug applications, abbreviated new drug applications, enantiomers, diastereomers, or stereochemistry for that matter. But what I do know is that COVID-19 equals Satan hates the Bible. And I can prove it to you. Look. 19 letters. It's true. Satan hates the Bible. The Bayh-Dole Act allows nonprofits to retain patents, unless it is noted that it's beneficial for the public good. Ever since that happened in the early 80s, destroyed science and gave rise to Bill Gates. Before that was passed, no one had ever heard of Bill Gates. Now, in 2020, he acts like he owns the place and throws millions, if not billions, at charity in hopes that it will what? Better the world? He wants to put chips inside of you. How in the hell do you get a bag of Doritos into a person without killing them, Nikki? That is science, Nikki. Science, damn it.
I have to ask, are you anti-vaccination?
No. Absolutely not. Vaccines are immunotherapy, and my job is to develop immunotherapy.
The disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside? Or and then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way.
Do I believe they were made from the souls of children trafficked by Hillary Clinton and the dominoes that annoyed to enslave the world for a farm for lizard people? Absolutely. These vaccines are dangerous. They roam the streets at night looking for people to recruit, rape, or inject. Millions of young lives are going to be destroyed by these thuggish vaccines, and the people who own them are poised to make zillions. These super predators will be made to heal infection. Forget that vaccines contain an inoculated live virus, a dead virus, viral or bacterial protein, or even bacterial polysaccharides that give your immune system antibodies that recognize the disease-causing antigens and then obliterates them. All you need to remember is that Bill Gates and George Soros built Hillary Clinton in a Microsoft lab in the 1980s, where she ultimately contracted a computer virus that turned her into the Mecha Snowflake Clinton Foundation chemtrail Muslim she is today. Did I mention all the trace amounts of additives they use to stabilize and preserve the vaccine? I mean, forget trace amounts of arsenic that are naturally occurring in apple seeds, or the trace amounts of Roundup scientists are finding in Triscuits. These completely harmless additives that have never been correlated with disease will gain sentience, abduct your children, and take your guns. Forget about organic chemistry and lipid and food science. Blah. There is no way ever that people would allow preservatives and added ingredients to go into their bodies. I mean, good thing so many Americans eat an all-natural organic diet, Nikki.
Do you believe that the virus was created in a lab?
I wouldn't use the word created, but I will say that Alex Jones and I concluded without a shadow of a doubt that viruses are often studied in a lab. Now explain that to me, Nikki. And also explain China hosting the Olympics in Beijing in 2008, then Barack Hussein Obama, with the help of Satan and the Legion of Doom, illegally stole the election in 2008 and replaced the Constitution with Shania Twain and martial law. And now, you expect me to believe that Mark Twain invented Shania Twain law? That does not make sense, Nikki. Although the first Ebola outbreak happened in 1976 in the Congo and killed 218 people with a mortality rate of 88%, I'm going to pretend like I worked on the Ebola virus in the lab in the late 90s and say that before the 90s, there was absolutely no way that Ebola could infect humans. I taught Ebola everything it knows today. Nikki. Why won't you learn? This virus is not naturally occurring. We're talking major governmental direction from the world's governments that required intense calculation, finances, and secrecy. You want me to believe that a human-born virus infected a pig that had been infected with a chicken-born virus? Those viruses merged in the pig's host cell and then were able to go on and infect millions globally and kill around 50 million people? I highly doubt that. That would be called accelerated viral evolution with velocity, speed, gravity, mass, and inertia. It would take up to 8 jillion years to occur. Oh, I'm sure it occurred between North Carolina and Wuhan laboratories. I mean, money was flowing from the US from Fauci to Wuhan. Millions of dollars in funding. What were they doing? I'm not convinced they weren't injecting 5G towers into bats, training them to use cell phones, and then selling the trained 5G bats to India to outsource more American jobs, while Bill Gates created COVID in the back of a 1987 Cutlass Supreme in an abandoned warehouse in Chinatown, USA, and then with the help of AOC and Rita Repulsa And the do-nothing Democrats, they unleashed it around the world. Plandemic. My husband, who was terrorized for 5 days, now has COPD from the asbestos they used to interrogate him. And who is to say that if he were to die today, that they wouldn't just call it COVID? And we hear this happening from the doctors and nurses who are upset.
I've seen so many doctors posting just perplexed by the protocols that the CDC recommends.
Testing? Forget testing.
No, I didn't mention testing, just the protocols that the CDC.
Why would they want to skew the numbers of COVID-19? Why are doctors being pressured to write COVID in for causes of death when the patient dies of a respiratory infection? Millions of accurate tests could have not prepared us for this. Investing in research to develop technology that could easily detect COVID, contact tracing, and expansive testing are propaganda coming directly from Fauci by the lizard overlords. Asymptomatic cases that show people being infected for up to 40 days who are infecting multiple people are of no concern. It's a distraction. Fauci, Gates, Hillary Clinton, and Oprah all want you to think that testing a majority of Americans with accurate, easy-to-use, and affordable tests will show where it is and how to stop the flow of this virus. Yeah. You don't die with an infection, you die from an infection. It's no concern of mine if increased viral expression in patients often causes cascades of issues cellularly that can affect anything from brain tissue to kidney tissue. Oh, yeah, it would be easy to explain how the failings of our healthcare system allow for corruption, and the privatization of the medical insurance industry often preys upon the sick and poor. But I'm going to talk about hospitals are given $13 billion per patient by Nancy Pelosi and her super PAC Fetus Feast if they call it a COVID death, a number I invented that is completely unfounded. Never mind that it requires a lab confirmation to be considered a COVID death, or that hospital administrators and CEOs engage in shady insurance fraud because our current private system allows and encourages it. This is a clear example of the deep state lying about COVID to make us live in fear about how millions are actually going to die due to the inaction of the current presidential administration and its lust for unchecked capitalism.
Why was Italy hit so hard?
Well, God hates the Italians.
I want to talk about masks and gloves now.
You expect me to believe that if someone who is shedding the virus from their mouth or nose wears a mask, that will prevent any sort of contamination? I mean, wake up. Sounds an awful lot like government overreach. I mean, you're supposed to want to be exposed to bacteria and viruses. They're your friend. And another thing, this quarantine is lowering people's immune system, so we're gonna need to stop cleaning our surfaces and just start hanging out in crowded stairwells with our neighbors and just cough together so that we can have our good bugs fighting the bad bugs. Viruses and bacteria make up your immune system, not actual vaccines of inoculated bacteria and viruses that have been studied for decades.
Why are parks and beaches closed?
And why are the beaches closed? You cannot tell me that Lord Cthulhu has not breached our dimension and is not currently swirling about both the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. And the deep state is hiding it because the lizard overlords cannot risk exposure, Nikki.
Wow.
Hey everyone, I'm the internet's Douglas Scott Cameron, and boy did we have fun today. What's not fun is lying to America though, kids. What do we say to liars? That's right. Now kids, let's discuss science. Science deals in facts and relies on extensive experimentation, data collection, and analyses to draw conclusions. Researchers go through years of education and focus on a tiny problem that they then come up with a hypothesis for.
Then, for the remainder of their careers usually, they run experiments and collect data to test the hypothesis. The work then gets sent to other labs and scientists who are working on similar experiments with the intention that the results can be replicated and then peer-reviewed. If the peer review is accepted, the study gets published in a paper. And most scientific papers are the results of years of intense research and hard labor. Anyone can make a well-produced documentary, and this can be dangerous. Anyone can claim any sort of expertise and make outlandish claims that have no data or are backed by any sources or science. Vaccination is a science. The good thing about science, though, is that even if you don't believe it, it will always be true. Thanks and have a wonderful day, America. Stay woke.